So this is not a new story. But the whole idea that there was any collusion with Trump that's where the narrative and the charade is, because everybody knows Russia's trying to undermine the U.S., has been for years. That's not a new story. The story that the Democrats have been riding and this Trump collusion is simply not true, and we have no evidence of it.
Well, look, I mean, you're talking to the wrong guy. You should be talking to his people about whether they colluded. Mike Flynn was the national was his national security advisor. He had to leave because he lied about his contacts with the Russians within a month of the campaign. When Sally Yates, the acting attorney general, told the White House counsel that Mr. Flynn had been compromised, they did exactly nothing until the Washington Post broke the story.
And that was Hillary Clinton's campaign manager at the time, John Podesta, with more lies, with me on Fox Business back in 2017, joining me in Mornings with Maria as I pushed him against the Trump-Russia hoax. That was when President Trump was in office just a few months, as the House Oversight Committee is now also investigating Joe Biden's presidency, his mental fitness, and the use of an auto pen during his term. On Thursday, Biden's former chief of staff, Ron Klain, spoke with the committee, with a source revealing to Fox News that he said the 46th president often confused names and situations, and it got worse throughout the four-year term. Joining me now with more on the two biggest political scandals of our time, both orchestrated by the Democrats, is Mollie Hemingway, editor of The Federalist, and Peter Schweizer from the Government Accountability Institute, who also saw through these scandals early on. Great to be with you. Great to be aligned with you both. You've done incredible work over the last 10 years. Thank you. Mollie, kick us off here. Give us your analysis of Ron Klain's testimony and the use of the auto pen. Is any of that legitimate now that we know that we're not sure if Joe Biden actually knew what he was doing?
Of course, it's legitimate to look into what the mental condition of President Biden was and what the people closest to him were doing about it. And we have in this testimony Ron Klain admitting that people knew that there were problems with Joe Biden late into his term. But I think it's worth remembering that yes, everybody saw that that was happening. What happened also was this conspiracy of Democrats to hide that information or hide it from being a big deal. But it would not have worked without a fully compliant media. That is what links the Biden-Klein story to also the Russia collusion hoax. When you have the Russia collusion hoax and people conspiring to spread a false narrative, it wouldn't have worked if everybody in the media, with a few small exceptions, hadn't gone along with it and run with these false claims.
That's a great point. Peter.
Yeah, no, I agree with Mollie. And also, look, the notion that these White House staffers are somehow insisting that, no, he seemed fine to us is ridiculous. Just look at the numbers. He had, in 2021, 58 known phone calls with foreign leaders. By 2024, it was down to 20. Look at the press conferences. He went from having 9 solo press conferences in 2021 to having 0 in 2024. There are conscious decisions that were being made to make sure that he was not exposed to the public. So they all knew what was going on. And Mollie's exactly right. You expect that from White House officials, but the media was completely negligent on this.
I mean, it's just so extraordinary, the efforts that they went to stop President Trump. And is it, do you think, Peter, an effort to hide the fraud that perhaps they were committing, or was it that they just didn't want a businessman in there? They knew that he knew what they were doing. I mean, think about it. You know, you had 90-plus indictments. You had lies, attacks, made-up stories like Russia collusion, not to mention 2 assassination attempts.
Yeah, no, I think you're exactly right. And look, here's the bottom line with Joe Biden. Joe Biden was the so-called centrist candidate in 2020. When he became president, he became one of the most progressive, perhaps the most progressive left-wing president we've ever had. That is a reflection of the staff. I don't think Joe Biden pivoted that quickly. So the reason that the progressive left didn't mind this is because they were getting exactly what they wanted. And if you look at the interviews that Hunter Biden has been giving, I think it plays out this same dynamic, this bitterness that the Biden family has that said, look, we did what you wanted and you stabbed us in the back anyway.
Yeah, and look, you've got to also point out, Mollie, that many of the people who were working in the Biden administration were the very same people who planted and pushed this Russia collusion lie that we just spoke about with CIA Director John Ratcliffe, and we will be speaking with Devin Nunes shortly. Your reaction?
Well, my reaction to what you just heard from CIA Director John Ratcliffe on your show is that he actually broke some pretty major news there. You are giving this story the weight that it is due. We have had, in the last week, absolutely explosive revelations about what the Obama administration did to attempt to sabotage the incoming Trump administration. Because you are giving this story the weight that it's due, you were able to break the news that John Durham says we are going to get the declassified annex to the John Durham report, which apparently will have some more explosive stuff in there. Yeah. This is such a major story that he also explained, too, something that has been convoluted in previous coverage, which is the conspiracy against Trump is ongoing. People are so worried about a statute of limitations because some of the crimes that were committed were previous to 5 years ago. But because the conspiracy is ongoing, it's going on right now, not just with these same officials, Brennan and Obama, but also the media who are active participants in this conspiracy. It's ongoing. The investigation is into activity that is happening even as we speak. And so I think that's an important thing that was revealed as well.
Well,
Maria.
Mollie, I mean, there's no coincidence that you haven't heard a peep about this Russia collusion lie being blown up on the mainstream media. They refuse to report it.
They refuse to report it because it makes them look bad. Again, Obama, Brennan, and Comey could have done everything that they wanted to do to pit this false narrative. But if they had had skeptical media, more than the about 10 of us there that were skeptical, then they never would have been able to accomplish it. And people are they're wanting to forget how bad it was. It was years of absolute hysteria. It absolutely destroyed years of an administration. It ruined people's lives. It ruined foreign relations. I mean, it's no laughing matter to falsely accuse another country of conspiring with the incoming president. That's the type of thing where wars break out. And so for people to say, we want to move on, and that's only because the media were active co-conspirators in these crimes.
That's exactly right. And Peter, if you go back and think about the way President Trump was dealing with being commander-in-chief, he didn't have cooperation. He didn't have people who wanted to be in the administration. A lot of people were skeptical about even joining his administration, so he couldn't get the right people into jobs. You had questions about a sitting commander-in-chief that kept him in a box, unable to do certain things that he could have done to lead the American people even better.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great description, Maria. And of course, I think they're probably trying to do that right now in different ways. I will also point out, Maria, I think it was particularly rich, the John Podesta exchange that you had. Yeah. This is a guy that literally a couple years before that interview was on the board of directors of an energy company called Juul Energy that had taken $40 million from Russia's sovereign wealth fund, Rusnana, that was personally run by Vladimir Putin. So it's absurd what they did. Look, I think the more transparency is the better. One name I'd like to see out there more is Gina Haspel. She was the CIA director appointed by Donald Trump. She certainly had access to this material. It's interesting to me that she had been the London chief of the CIA in the 2000s. In 2014, John Brennan sent her back to London, which is a highly unusual move. And she was there throughout this period. And much of the Russia collusion intel, fake intel, was coming out of London from Steele and others. So it's a very interesting question. What role did she play not only in perhaps creating this, but what role did she play in suppressing it when she was CIA director and she was supposed to be serving Donald Trump rather than the CIA establishment?
It's a great point. Real quick, before you guys go, Mollie, do you think we will see accountability here? You just heard what the director of the CIA told us. And what about the pardons that weren't even signed by Joe Biden? It was by an auto pen. Are those legitimate? And what about January 6th? Is there more to discover there?
It will not be good if there is not accountability. Some of the crimes that were committed here are quite serious. And so I think the DOJ needs to be thinking very hard about how to make it happen. But we also need to understand that Obama and Brennan and Comey, they're all out of office. But the media who did this, they're still in office. They're still perpetrating hoaxes against the American people. They're still meddling in every election by just receiving propaganda and regurgitating it instead of doing actual journalism.
Yep.
So the accountability has to include the media as well.
I want to thank you both for your incredible work, your courage, and your journalism. Mollie Hemingway, Peter Schweizer, thank you. Happy to be aligned with you.
Hi, everyone. I'm Brian Kilmeade. I want you to do me a favor. I want you to click to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page. This is the only way that I know for sure that you're not going to miss any great commentary, any great news bites, any great interviews coming your way on Fox. You can get it all here on YouTube. So subscribe right now.